Hi there, I'm Sean Osterlink, and this is Overcoming with ACT. Thank you for showing up today to watch another video with me. I appreciate whoever is viewing these videos, so thank you. And what I'm going to talk about today is another ACT-related topic. Hey, that's on point with what I've named my channel. So I've got a Defusion skill up here today. I'm going to call this number 1 just because this tends to be an introductory skill that I teach people, and I have a handout that I usually give people that has a bunch of different skills laid out, and this is the one that I have number 1 on it for, so that makes sense. So what I'll probably do is go through the order that I have on that handout because it's one I like to give. So this skill is all about first developing that stance of just noticing what the mind is doing, watching it, like putting it out there and watching what is the mind doing rather than getting caught up in content of the mind. Content would be, and I've talked about this in other videos, content would be believing the thoughts, the messages themselves. If I, let's say, think of an example. I should think of examples like before I do these videos, but I like to be really impromptu. So let's say I screwed up on something, right? I just make a mistake of some kind, and then maybe I have an automatic thought of like, that was a disaster. Wow, like that couldn't have gone worse. A thought like that within CBT, I might look at it as like, well, well, for one, I could judge that thought and go, that thought's really negative. That might be like a catastrophizing sort of thought or an all or nothing kind of thought. And so, a conventional CBT approach would be like, well, let's reframe that. Let's look at this more positively. Let's try to balance this out. Let's look at it from different angles. And we do that in therapy too, and that can be really helpful to do that in person, conversation, or in journaling. Like, that's absolutely helpful. I'll work with people on that, and at the same time, when we're taking an ACT stance, an observing self stance, and getting mindful and getting present, the thing to do with that kind of thought is, rather than getting caught up in the content of what that thought means, like wow, I screwed up and that was the worst and that was a disaster, like to hear those words and literalize them and to become fused with them probably brings some negative emotion, maybe disappointment, maybe a sense of failure. The more I'm thinking about that, the more I'm giving room to that negative sort of thinking. The weightier it becomes, the more real it becomes. It might bring even more negative kind of junk with it, right? What else have I messed up at? How else is my day going poorly? Something like that. So it can just build up even more. And my attention can get pulled ever more into just a negative cycle there. So this process here of noticing is what we're going to be working on building today. And so what I've written up here is, I notice the thought and I notice the feeling. I notice the feeling of. And so the way that this works is, in order to deliteralize, take that content and don't treat it literally, defuse from it, not be getting all caught up in this like negative spiral of what's going on in here. This is also called unhooking. These are all interchangeable terms, right? A negative thought has come along, it's got a hook, and I've gotten hooked on that negative thought and it's carrying me away. I want to unhook from that. And I'm not going to try to positive self-talk my way out of it. I'm not going to try to just distract my way out of it. I'm not going to try to fight against it. I'm not going to try to run away from it. I'm just going to take a stance of observing with non-judgment. I'll write that up here because that carries through like anything in ACT. Observe with, I put a little W, non-judgment. Okay, and so the language being used here, the way we're using this self-talk, is to get some space in order to just observe this thing, like dispassionate, non-judgmental observing. So let's say I have that thought of this is a disaster and it couldn't have gone, maybe it couldn't have gone any worse. I think that's what I said. I'd have to rewatch the video to remember what I said. I don't have it in front of me. So, okay, so what I would do instead to take a defusion stance is go, I noticed the thought that this couldn't have gone any worse, that this was a disaster. I could even lengthen that. I notice I'm having the thought that this couldn't have gone any worse, that this was a disaster, right? And so I'm getting some distance there. Instead of, I've screwed up, this is a disaster, it couldn't go any worse, my day is ruined. I notice, I'm putting it out there, taking it from here, putting it out there. I notice I'm having the thought that this day is ruined. I'm noticing that I'm having the thought that this couldn't have gone any worse. Okay, I'm putting it out there with my language. I'm getting disconnected, defused from it using my language. Okay, that rather than I'm having this thought and this thought is me, I can notice that there is a thought, it's coming up, it's being produced by the mind, and yet there's a me that can step back from it and observe. I'm noticing I'm having that thought. That is just a thought. Okay? I notice that the tissue box over there is yellow. I notice that the tissue box over there is purple. And I notice that my mind just put a thought out there that this is the worst, this is ruined, I've screwed up, and it's terrible. Right? And I notice that that thought is there too. And I notice that the wall is beige. And I noticed I had a thought that I just noticed that I've got a fountain over there. And so there are other things in my experience that I can notice too, that I can pay attention to. And so rather than elevating that negative thought and going, well, look at this thing, this is terrible, I'm going, yeah, that's a thing. It's a thing. It's not a terrible thing. It's just a thing. And I can notice the other things too. I can notice the other things that my mind is doing too. And I can do this with feelings too. Or I can do this with sensations as well. So I go and I notice the feeling of disappointment showing up. I notice that I'm observing the sensation of disappointment. Maybe I notice the sensation of frustration showing up in here. Tension. Maybe the sense would be tension maybe showing up in my body. And the emotion might be frustration or disappointment. Instead of going, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling disappointed, I've really screwed up and I ruined my day. Instead of doing that, I'm going, I notice the thought of having messed up. I notice the thought of this being ruined, of this being the worst. I notice that my mind is putting out those thoughts, and I notice the feelings of disappointment showing up. I notice the feelings of frustration showing up. I notice that that's showing up in my body. I notice the sensations of tension showing up in my body where that is, wherever that may be showing up at, or so there's some sort of discomfort. Rather than going, I'm really uncomfortable with that, I'm going, I notice that feeling of discomfort is showing up. And so again, instead of it's like this discomfort, I'm putting it over here and going, I see that there. And by getting that distance, then I can go and I can have room for that to be there, right? And so I'm using my language to reinforce an acceptance stance. This isn't a positive self-talk stance. So this isn't, I can do it, rah, rah, rah. This will get better with time. I just have to withstand this. There's really good parts of this too. There's other good things I did with my day. There's other ways that I'll do better with this. I'm not taking that cheerleader self-coaching stance when I'm doing ACT Defusion. I'm taking a acceptance stance. Right? I'm not trying to shoo it away. There's a pain there. There's a real thing that's there. There's a negative thought that showed up that in this scenario correlates to maybe a real bad thing happened, and then I have a bad thought about the bad thing. I have a negative thought about the bad thing. And instead of going, and that's a negative thought I need to get rid of about the thing that happened, I'm going, that thing happened. And I acknowledge that I'm having a thought about that. And maybe that thing happened and it evoked an emotion. And I'm acknowledging that that emotion is there. And so I'm making that space. I'm making that space to allow that to be there. Okay? It's all about building that stance of acceptance. I can make room for this. I can hold this here. I can hold this, and it can be lighter. And on this doesn't have to be a weighty thing. It doesn't have to be a thing that I have to make, that I have to give ever more space into as far as getting tangled up in it and trying to get rid of it. I'm just going to let it be there. I'm just going to notice that it's there. And so you can play with this. You can make this your own. You can use language to extend this even more and practice it. Play with it. Part of ACT is workability. Does it work for you? What works for you and doesn't work for you? I remember using this activity when I was walking in, I was in Lake Michigan, and I was walking in this really cold water. The lake was really cold. And I decided to use this ACT stance, this tool for that. And so I was telling myself, I just noticed the sensation. I noticed the feeling of the cold water on my body right now. I just noticed the feeling of the cold water on my body right now. And I noticed that as I was practicing that it actually kind of worked to help me feel a little better. Now, of course, I say that with reservation, because the point of using this stuff is not to feel better, because then that only reinforces the need for control. So you want to take anything that's feeling better as like the happy consequence, a happy accident. It's like, well, that's nice. Because the more you're like, this needs to work. I'm using diffusion to work. I'm using diffusion because I need to feel better. The more you may get hooked into, and why isn't it working? Why aren't I feeling better? Like, I keep saying this. I keep saying the stupid stuff that therapist Sean told me to use, and the stupid ACT stuff, and it's not working. Like, that would actually be being fused, being hooked, entangled in another control thing. Then that would actually be using diffusion in an attempt to be engaging in experiential control. I'm trying to practice acceptance and hold this lightly and going, work, go away. Okay, that is not an acceptance stance. That's not going to work that way. That causes people frustration. And yeah, so if you notice that you're trying to defuse and that you're trying to make diffusion work, take a step back from that and defuse from that though. Defuse from that too. You're like, okay, I noticed that my mind is having thoughts that this diffusion thing should work. I noticed the thought that diffusion is stupid. I noticed the thought that the diffusion isn't working. I noticed the feeling that there's frustration showing up in my body right now. And that's okay. And that's okay too. And that's okay for it to be there. Okay? And so I'll make some more videos of some more diffusion skills. And there's going to be a consistent theme here that it's all about building acceptance. And so you can get creative with it. When I've watched trainings on this, I've read books on this, they encourage creativity. You can make your own. It's all about developing this stance of like, accept what's showing up and make room for it. And ground yourself in the moment. Like, be here now. Be in this moment right now. And then connect with, and where do you want to go? If you can get out of your head and the suffering that you're trying to get rid of, then where can you go from there by just being right here in this moment and accepting what is happening? That's a powerful place to be, right? It's a place from where you get to choose your next move. So thank you for stopping by today. I hope that this made some semblance of sense. If it didn't, you can always go to some other person's YouTube that explains ACT and diffusion, or read a book by like Russ Harris or Stephen Hayes, or someone who invented or came up with ACT. So thank you for stopping by, and I'll see you next time.